Hi, good evening. It's nice to see so many people. I must confess, when I was coming here tonight, I've been on a few panels with Robin McAlpine, and so I was keeping my speech quite small to allow Robin to talk and talk and talk. He's brilliant. And I was also looking forward to being the youngest person on the panel, and these boys are 17, and at 32, almost 33, I'm almost double their age, and it's quite interesting listening to them speaking about voting in the referendum for the first time, because the first time I could actually take part in an election was in 1999 to the first Scottish Parliament under devolution. And when I went to university, we had student tuition fees, which have left me with a legacy of debt, which I wouldn't want anybody else going to university to do. But I'm sitting here thinking, oh no, they're 17. They've kind of showed me up. I wish I hadn't been campaigning so long for young people to get the right to vote at 16. So well done, guys. Imagine stepping into the breach. I can't imagine my 17-year-old self being able to do that. I read an interesting, scary article in the Telegraph the other week, and perhaps it's my own fault for reading the Telegraph. Perhaps it doesn't necessarily agree with my particular political persuasion, but I like to make sure that I'm reading everything to get all the information. I think it's important, if you're talking to other people, that you at least take cognizance of other sides of the debate and what's happening across the UK and in Scotland as well. So the article I read was about the squeezed middle, the middle classes who are really suffering from the effects of wage freezes, from the economic crash, from inflation, prices going up for gas, electricity, for food, for pretty much everything. And so I thought, that's a fair point. It does affect people in the middle classes as much as, well, not as much as, but it does affect people in the middle classes. And then I looked at the example that they'd chosen to use. And it was a gentleman who was the sole breadwinner in his family of 4. And he is on £120,000 per year. And his particular bugbears about this were he's had to ditch shopping in Ocado and getting deliveries made to his large house in the country. He can't remember the last time he went on a city break. Now, he also pays £45,000 per year for his children to go to private schools. So just putting aside the fact that he's in the top 5% of UK earners, and think about this, what he pays for his kids' private tuition fees are 3 times what somebody working 40 hours on the living wage, not the minimum wage, but the living wage, would earn in a year. Whilst families in work are increasingly relying on additional support, that's in work with additional support needs, people at the top of the economic food chain, we have people like this gentleman who actually said, quoted, yeah, people in council schemes might think I'm mad. I thought, mad? No, you are completely out of touch with the realities of the economic circumstances for many people at the bottom of the food chain, and people who are out of work or in work, but out of work for no fault of their own, whether it be through childcare responsibilities, caring for family members, because there isn't a system to do that within within the UK, or because they have illness or any other number of factors. And so, did I feel particularly sorry for that gentleman? I didn't, no. At the moment, we live in one of the most unequal countries in the world. Just last week, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, adding to the work of Oxfam and the Children's Poverty Action Group, found that there's been an increase of 56% of people who are in work who are having to claim housing benefit because they can't afford to make the choice between heating and eating whilst also having housing. The minimum wage has failed to keep pace with inflation. It was brought in with much fanfare, and then we have seen it completely eroded while inflation has risen and it has remained static. There are all these promises about what will happen at the next general election, but for 10 years we haven't seen a rise in minimum wages according to inflation, which means people are increasingly relying on housing benefit and other top-ups because it simply doesn't pay. And the link between pensions and earnings have been broken, which means people who have worked and paid all their lives are actually finding it harder and harder to heat their houses, to eat at times where they had worked and were assured that they would be comfortable in their old age. I think that's a dreadful way to treat people that have given so much. And in terms of gender equality, the UK has fallen from 9th position to 27th position in the Gender Equality Index. And that sounds like big fancy schmancy talk, but what it really means is that the difference in pay and other things as indicators show that women are now much, much worse off than they were 5 years ago. And there are many reasons for that, but some of the ones I've talked about are those reasons. The minimum wage. Women are more likely than men to be in transient work or part-time work because a lot of us have childcare responsibilities or caring responsibilities. Disproportionately, women have those responsibilities and have to fit working lives around that if they can. So these are just some things where women are being most adversely affected by the economic crash. And gentlemen, I'm not saying you're not, but the cuts that have come down from Westminster, 80% of them have affected women the most. And I think it's important that we remember that, and that's one of the reasons that Women for Independence exists, to actually give a voice to women, because all too often we see platforms and discussions on political programmes in newspapers where we don't have women's voices represented. At 52% of the population, I think we should have a voice and we need to use it. And this referendum has been brilliant. I see it as a kind of very democratising process where people are having conversations with neighbours and more people are interested in voting, and you've got groups that are coming out and people that have never campaigned before. And Women for Independence is one of them. I mean, I was political, but most of the women that are in it have never been political before, and that is brilliant. And Jean Freeman, who's one of the co-founders, said, do you know what, we're out the box and we're not going back in. So regardless of what happens in September, we are going to still continue on. Now, we live in a country where the Red Cross, the Trussell Foundation, and others are providing food to families. Some of them are in work, some of them are not, and they're having to make a choice whether or not their kids can go to school with food on the table. And I think that the reliance of food banks is a scourge on our society. And we might be said to be economically wealthy at the top of the OECD food chain, but we can't say that we are a rich country when our people suffer the indignity of food banks. And yet, under devolution, we have, despite the financial straitjacket, done so much together. We've managed to demonstrate that where we have the powers that we fought for in 1997, we've made substantially different choices. We've made progressive choices, compassionate choices, and choices which carry a democratic endorsement of the people in Scotland. And, you know, there have been disagreements between the various political parties about various issues. That's democracy, and that's healthy. But there has also been much unanimity of purpose. I managed to get that out, thank goodness. We've had the rolling back of the NHS reforms, which have decimated the NHS in England, the protection of the NHS budget, the right to free personal care, the right to free education, and the mitigation of the abhorrent bedroom tax. But the Scottish Government shouldn't be there to mitigate the worst effects of choices made at Westminster that we did not make. Because every time we have to mitigate policies made by governments we didn't vote for, that means that money has gone from spending it on something else that we could do in the country. But these are just a few examples of the more high-profile things that we've done as a devolved government. And so it gives us confidence that where we've had the power, we can make different choices. And as we look to the future, that should give us every confidence that actually we are able to make choices, and we're able to make better choices, and choices which benefit the majority of people in Scotland, regardless of the party that's in power in Scotland. We know from successive social attitude surveys that people in Scotland tell us that they want, over 2/3 of people in Scotland tell us that they want full power over welfare, full power over taxation. And in the last few weeks and months, we've heard the proposals from the parties that are telling us to vote no And they have rolled back from early commitments that may have been there, and the Conservatives are about to bring theirs out. And it doesn't have any commitment to welfare either, or so it would seem. So in terms of Devo Max or Devo Nano or Devo whatever this system is, it already does not give us what people in Scotland are telling us they want if they were to choose new powers. At the rate of increased powers that we've had since 1997, it would take us 170 years to get to full fiscal autonomy at the rate that we're going. I don't think that we can wait 170 years to have full control of the economic levers and the welfare levers in our country. So we have total control over the NHS, which, despite what you might be reading in some of the newspapers, some of the No campaign have suggested that a yes vote would threaten the NHS. On the contrary, the NHS in Scotland has always been separate from the NHS in England and the other NHS systems, and we have done a better job. But the problem we have, and it's been touched on earlier, is that every single time a part of the NHS in England is privatised, that means the government puts less money into the NHS in England, and the knock-on effect is we get a smaller budget, and there will become a point where, if that continues, we have to make very stark choices about what we can protect and what we can prioritise in our NHS. And it's the same in our education system. I feel like the burden of responsibility for paying for the higher education system has been put onto students who will have debts until they're 40 or 50. I know I won't have paid mine off until I'm 41, and I wasn't paying anything like £9,000 per year. And every time in the English education sector, they take money out of that because they're making the students pay for it. That means that the budget allocated to Scotland for that is smaller as well. So we have a big decision to make in Scotland. We are choosing between two futures, and neither of them are certain futures, because life is not certain. We certainly didn't see the economic crash in 2008, and if that's going to be put forward, that certainty in the UK, well, there's one that has affected probably every single person in this room, and none of the financial experts saw it coming. So we can continue as we are, subject to perhaps changes at Westminster. We have 1 in 4 of our children in poverty, with that set to rise because of the cuts that are still coming down. You can see almost a doubling of that in the next few years. We've got no offered control over areas that people in Scotland tell us that they want, like taxation or welfare. And we have a Westminster system which is so out of touch with ordinary people that an unelected Lord can go to the House of Lords for one day, tick his name off, or her name off, more likely to be men, but tick their name off and walk away with £300 in their pocket. I think that's a disgrace. There have been consistent governments for the last 100 years who have put forward Lords reform in their programme of government, and we've yet to see any of it. With independence, we can wipe that out, and that'll save us tens and tens of millions of pounds per year that we could use on children's education and bringing children out of poverty. So we can choose a different path. We can choose responsibility, choose democracy, choose to have confidence in ourselves. We can take full control of our natural resources. We can apply and nurture the huge wealth of talents that we have as a people, and in our education system. And we can use that to rejuvenate the entrepreneurial culture that we were always famous for. We can diversify our industries, and we can cultivate the 25% of Europe's natural energy in wind and tidal, wind, tidal and wave. And we can use and trade that technology to the rest of the world, because at the moment we have all the energy, but we're not producing the technology that goes with it. We should be reindustrialising with a green economy and actually selling that technology and being world leaders to the rest of the world. So we can create a childcare system which will demonstrate our commitment to early years education, recognising that children are our future, like that song said, but it's true. You know, we rely on children to be the tax base for paying pensions, etc. Not when they're children, of course. I'm not advocating child labour here. I just mean that when they grow up, they will be the people that are earning in our country. And early years education allows women and men to get back into work, because it's not all just about women. Early years education allows people to get education, meaningful and fulfilling employment, which are the best tools that we can offer our children and our families to work out of poverty. And this is our chance to ensure that women are at the forefront of any future constitution, because it's exciting. Imagine drawing up a new country from scratch, making sure that in the constitution we have things that are important to us and to protecting rights. And so we can ensure that a thread of social justice and equality runs right throughout that. And these are the stones on which we would build a new country. But word of caution, of course, independence isn't utopia. And it would be foolish to pretend that it is, and that we wake up in March in 2016 and everything will be perfect. Our legacy of some of the poorest health and outcomes in Europe won't change overnight. They could take generations to sort out. But many of the problems in our society are of our own making, and they're our responsibility. And it would be brilliant if we took the powers to fix them, to take the responsibility for them, and to change them. So this is our opportunity to say, at this point, enough is enough. Let's take the power into our own hands and trust that as the 14th richest country in the OECD, we can do better with our wealth for the people in our country. So this is our time. As Jim Siller said, this is our moment. Let's have faith that we as a people, as a society, can do it. And let's take that power and build our better country. Thank you.